The first strike. The galaxy was vast, filled with ancient empires and proud civilizations. Some had stood for thousands of years, ruling over entire sectors with iron fleets and endless armies. They believed themselves untouchable. Among these powers, whispers always carried one warning: do not attack humans. It was a phrase passed quietly, almost fearfully, across military councils and trade stations. But as centuries passed, some began to mock that warning, calling it superstition, nothing more than a myth told by traitors who loved exaggeration. The humans were newcomers compared to most great powers. They had only left their home world a few hundred years ago. To many alien eyes, humans looked weak, too small in number, too fragile in body. They did not have the ancient weapons or grand war fleets others had. What they did have was stubbornness, and that was something their enemies never truly understood, at least not at first. The day of the first strike came without warning. A mighty empire, one of the most feared in the Outer Rim, decided the time had come to expand. They had grown arrogant after crushing dozens of worlds into submission. Their fleets were massive, dark shadows blotting out suns. Their commanders laughed when the idea of human resistance was raised. To them, the humans were nothing but a frontier species, useful for mining colonies and trade posts not worth fearing. They sent their fleets to human space, confident the war would be quick. Their plan was simple: strike Earth's colonies first, burn their ships, and force them to kneel. When the first colony world burned, the enemy broadcast their victory across the stars. Towers of smoke rose from shattered cities. Millions of lives were lost. The attackers expected humanity to surrender at once. That was how most species reacted: bend the knee to survive, hand over their resources, and live as servants. But the humans did not kneel. Across every colony, across Earth itself, something older than fear rose in their hearts. It was anger, sharp and burning. They had been warned in history books of darker times, of world wars, of battles fought in trenches and skies filled with fire. Their ancestors had survived those trials, and now that same spirit lived again. The human fleet was not the largest in the galaxy. Many of their ships were smaller, less advanced. But when news spread of the enemy attack, not a single captain suggested retreat. They gathered what ships they had: old freighters refitted for combat, carriers pushed beyond their limits, and small destroyers bristling with weapons. Civilians volunteered to fight. Engineers turned mining rigs into war machines. Even children whispered the same words in schools: "We never surrender." The enemy had expected panic. Instead, they found a people who refused to break. In the first counterattack, a small human fleet of barely a dozen warships stood against an enemy formation 3 times their size. Outnumbered and outgunned, the humans should have fallen in minutes. But something happened the enemy did not expect. The humans fought with a fury that was almost frightening. They did not retreat even when their ships took heavy damage. Pilots rammed enemy cruisers when their weapons ran dry. Soldiers boarded warships with nothing but rifles and grenades, cutting their way through decks of steel. Whole crews went down with their vessels, choosing destruction over surrender. For every human ship destroyed, the enemy paid dearly. That first battle did not end in total victory for either side. Many human ships were lost. But the enemy fleet, shocked and bloodied, was forced to retreat for the first time in decades. It was a humiliation they had never suffered before. In their arrogance, they told themselves it was luck. They told themselves humans had fought recklessly, throwing away lives like fools. But deep inside, a seed of fear had been planted. They had seen it in the humans' eyes, even through the cold void of space, that unshakable resolve, that refusal to surrender. Back on Earth, the people did not mourn in silence. They rebuilt. They repaired damaged ships, trained new soldiers, and prepared for the battles to come. The leaders of humanity sent a single message across the stars, directed at the enemy empire that had struck first. You were warned. We will not kneel, we will not break, and we will never surrender. The words echoed through space, carried by every channel, repeated in every language. Some laughed at the defiance. Others, the ones who remembered the old warning, fell silent. They knew the storm had only just begun. The rising flame, the enemy empire, could not accept what had happened. To them, being forced to retreat from a primitive species was unthinkable. Their rulers demanded revenge, and their generals promised it would be swift. They gathered an even larger fleet, determined to crush humanity so completely that no trace of resistance would remain. But the humans were no longer the same people who had been caught unprepared during the first strike. The pain of loss had hardened them. Every burned colony, every fallen soldier, and every broken city became fuel for their determination. On Earth, factories worked day and night. On colonies, workers volunteered to turn every resource into weapons. Even ships not built for war were armed and sent into space. Humanity became a single fist, clenched tight. What the enemy did not understand was that humans did not fight only with weapons. They fought with spirit, creativity, and unity. In secret shipyards, engineers built new designs, fast, unpredictable vessels that could outmaneuver the Empire's massive cruisers. Commanders studied the enemy's tactics and began to twist them against them. Ordinary civilians became spies, hackers, and saboteurs striking behind enemy lines. It was not just a war, it was survival, and humanity had no thought of surrender. When the second great battle came, it was fought near a mining colony on the edge of human space. The enemy sent more than 200 ships, confident that overwhelming numbers would crush any defense. The humans had fewer than 50. By all logic, it should have been a massacre. But the battle did not go as the Empire expected. The human fleet did not meet the enemy head-on. Instead, they used the asteroid field around the colony as cover. Their smaller ships darted between rocks, vanishing and reappearing like ghosts. Missiles struck from hidden positions. Enemy cruisers tried to pursue, only to crash into asteroids or be lured into crossfires. Every human ship fought with reckless courage, turning space into a trap of fire and steel. The Empire's commanders grew frustrated. They had always relied on power and intimidation, never on patience. But patience was what the humans had mastered. For hours the battle raged, until finally the Empire's fleet pulled back once again. Their losses were staggering. Dozens of warships destroyed, many more damaged. For the second time, humanity had stood against impossible odds. For the second time, they had refused to kneel. News of the battle spread quickly across the galaxy. Traders, mercenaries, and wandering ships carried the stories from system to system. On distant worlds, people spoke in hushed voices about the humans, small in number, weak in body, yet unbroken in spirit. Some laughed, calling it exaggeration, but others began to remember the old warning: never attack humans. Inside the enemy empire, cracks began to show. Their leaders raged at the defeats, but soldiers whispered about the humans' defiance. Some wondered if this war would be the same as all others. Others began to doubt. Fear spread quietly like smoke in a sealed chamber. On Earth, however, there was no fear, only resolve. The leaders of humanity met in the Great Council chamber. Around them hung banners carrying the same words: never surrender. They knew the enemy would not stop. They knew more fleets would come. But they were ready. Humanity would fight no matter the cost. One admiral stood before the council and spoke words that would be remembered for generations. Our enemies believe we fight for victory. They are wrong. We fight because we must. We fight because surrender is not in us. Even if every ship burns, even if every world falls, humanity will endure. And in the end, we will rise. The council agreed. The message was sent to every soldier, every worker, every child. Humanity was united in purpose, and yet, deep in the void, the empire prepared again. They could not stop now. To retreat would mean humiliation, and humiliation meant the fall of their power. So they built the largest fleet ever seen, thousands of warships armed with the most terrible weapons of their age. They swore that this time, humanity would be erased forever. But the humans had already learned the truth of war. They had already turned pain into strength. And while the enemy built a fleet of steel, the humans carried something stronger: unbreakable will. The third battle was coming. And it would decide not only the fate of humanity, but the balance of the entire galaxy. The unbreakable wall, the galaxy, held its breath. The enemy empire's fleet was larger than any seen in centuries. Thousands of warships gathered in black formation, their shadows stretching across the stars. From monstrous dreadnoughts to swift destroyers, the armada looked unstoppable. The empire's rulers promised their people that this would be the end. Humanity would be crushed and their defiance erased from memory. But humans did not wait to be crushed. They prepared. Every shipyard on Earth and her colonies worked without pause. New warships, though smaller, rolled out of dry docks daily. Pilots trained in endless drills. Civilians carried weapons beside soldiers. Entire families swore oaths. If their cities burned, they would rebuild. If their ships fell, they would rise again. Humanity had no illusions. They knew the coming battle might destroy them. But they also knew surrender was not an option. The chosen battlefield was a quiet star system near the edge of human space. It was not rich in resources. It was not a stronghold. But it was the doorway to Earth, and humanity swore it would not be passed. When the Empire's armada arrived, the sky seemed to darken under its weight. Against them stood the human fleet, barely a few hundred ships. Compared to the enemy's thousands, they looked like insects facing a storm. The Empire's commanders laughed, confident the war would end in hours. Then the battle began. The first wave of enemy cruisers charged forward, their cannons spitting fire. Human ships scattered, dodging through the asteroid belt that ringed the system. The Empire saw it as cowardice, but it was not. It was strategy. Hidden mines exploded under the cruisers' advance, tearing open their hulls. Small human corvettes darted from cover, striking and vanishing like wolves. Fighters swarmed dreadnoughts, targeting weak points with surgical precision. For every human ship destroyed, 2 enemy ships fell. Still, the Empire pressed forward. Their numbers were overwhelming. Hours passed and human ships burned one after another. Yet even in destruction, they struck back. One frigate, its engines failing, rammed straight into a battleship, taking both down in a blazing fireball. Another, crippled and powerless, launched its last torpedoes before being torn apart, destroying 3 more enemy vessels. The Empire's commanders grew frustrated. They had expected surrender, not sacrifice. The humans fought as if death itself could not frighten them. Even as their fleet shrank, they refused to retreat. Then came the moment that shook the galaxy. At the center of the battle, the Empire unleashed its greatest weapon, a super dreadnought the size of a city. Its cannons could pierce moons. Its shields glowed like a burning sun. They called it the Hammer, a weapon meant to crush the heart of humanity. The hammer tore through the human line, destroying ship after ship. Hope seemed to flicker. On Earth, billions watched the battle through transmissions, silent with fear. And then a single human ship broke formation. It was an old battleship scarred from past fights. Its engines blazed as it charged straight at the hammer. The enemy laughed, certain the humans had gone mad. But they did not understand. The battleship's captain gave only one order: hold the line. The ship accelerated, taking fire from every side, but it did not stop. Its shield shattered, its hull broke, yet it kept going, and at the final moment, with engines screaming, it slammed directly into the hammer's heart. The explosion was blinding. For a moment, the stars themselves seemed to shake. When the fire cleared, the hammer was gone, split in half, torn to pieces. The Empire's greatest weapon lay silent in the void. A cheer rose across human ships. On Earth, people wept with pride. That single sacrifice had proven what the galaxy had always whispered. Humans did not surrender. Even against impossible odds, they fought until the very end. The Empire, stunned, hesitated for the first time. Their fleet, though still massive, began to falter. And in that hesitation, humanity struck back with everything they had left. Missiles, fighters, and warships surged forward. The battle raged for hours more until finally both fleets lay broken, wreckage drifting across the stars. Neither side claimed full victory. Humanity had lost most of its fleet. The Empire had lost its greatest weapon and countless ships. But the truth was clear to all who watched. The humans could not be broken. The turning tide, the Battle of the Hammer, changed everything. For centuries, the enemy empire had ruled through fear. No rival had ever stood against them. Worlds surrendered before their fleets even arrived. But now, across the galaxy, the story spread. Humanity had faced the Empire's greatest weapon and destroyed it. Though bloodied and broken, they had not fallen. The words "never surrender" carried farther than any warship could travel. On distant planets, ordinary people whispered about humans with awe. Traders who once mocked them now spoke with respect. Some enslaved colonies secretly cheered, hoping that if the humans could stand against the Empire, perhaps they too could be free. The warning, once dismissed as legend, now became prophecy. Never attack humans because humans never give up. But in the Empire's capital, rage boiled. Their rulers could not believe their mighty fleets had been stopped. To them, humanity was an insult that had to be erased, yet their soldiers whispered differently. The memory of humans ramming ships, fighting to the last breath, burned in their minds. Fear began to poison the Empire from within. Humanity, though scarred, grew stronger. The survivors of the Great Battle returned to Earth and her colonies like heroes. Entire cities lit up with their names. Children drew their faces on walls, calling them guardians of the stars. But even as they celebrated, humanity knew the war was far from over. The Empire would return, and next time the strike would be even greater. So humans prepared again. Damaged ships were rebuilt. New weapons were forged. Scientists worked in hidden labs, inventing technologies that pushed beyond limits. Colonies that once mined quietly now built engines of war. Humanity was no longer fighting for survival alone. They were fighting to prove that they belonged among the stars, and they were not alone anymore. For the first time, envoys from other species came quietly to meet human leaders. Small worlds tired of empire rule offered secret supplies. Mercenaries pledged their fleets in exchange for alliances. Even old rivals of humanity, once distant and cold, began to see them as something new. An unbreakable wall against tyranny. The galaxy was watching, and some had begun to hope, but the empire was not finished. Shamed by defeat, they turned to desperate measures. They began to build weapons forbidden even by their own traditions, planet killers, engines of annihilation. Their leaders swore that no matter the cost, they would crush humanity. They sent spies into human space, saboteurs to break industry and assassins to strike leaders. Yet everywhere they tried, the humans pushed back. Factories destroyed were rebuilt in weeks. Leaders killed were replaced with stronger ones. Every attempt to break them only made them harder. The empire grew more fearful, not of human weapons, but of human spirit. One admiral of the empire, broken by the battles, confessed in secret, "They are not like us. They fight with something we cannot understand. They fight with their very soul. Even if we burn their worlds, their ghosts would keep fighting." Meanwhile, humanity's council gathered once again. In the chamber filled with banners, leaders debated. Some called for defense to guard Earth above all else. Others demanded to strike first, to show the galaxy that humans would not only endure but lead. The argument lasted for days until finally one voice settled it. "If we wait, the Empire will come to us with fire. If we stand, they will bleed us dry. But if we strike first, then all will see we are not prey. We are not weak. We are human." The decision was made. Humanity would no longer wait behind defenses. They would take the war into the Empire's heart. It was a dangerous choice. Their fleets were smaller, their numbers fewer. But they carried something the Empire would never have: unbroken will. Preparations began for the boldest campaign in human history. Shipyards built faster, colonies trained harder, and messages spread across the stars. Humanity was coming. In the shadows of space, the Empire's spies listened, terrified. They had been told humans would surrender. They had been told humans were weak, but now they knew the truth. The next battle would not be for survival alone. It would be for the future of the galaxy. The final stand. The galaxy trembled as humanity prepared its boldest move. For generations, the Empire had been untouchable, its fleets dark storms across the stars. But now a new storm was rising. Humanity, smaller in number yet unbroken in spirit, gathered its remaining fleets for a strike into the Empire's very heart. It was not only war, it was defiance written across the void. The plan was dangerous. Human ships would jump into enemy territory, striking their shipyards, cutting their supply lines, and forcing the Empire to fight on ground it once believed safe. Every admiral knew the cost would be high. But every captain, every soldier, and every worker understood the truth. If they did nothing, Earth would fall. If they fought even in death, they would carve a path for their children. And so humanity struck. The campaign began with silence. Out of the black, human ships emerged above the Empire's outer worlds. They hit fast and vanished, burning shipyards before the enemy fleets could respond. Supply lines shattered. Colonies that had lived under the Empire's chains for centuries suddenly rose in rebellion, emboldened by the humans' courage. For the first time in memory, the Empire found itself pushed back, not by a larger power but by a people who refused to break. The Empire answered with fury. They unleashed their forbidden weapons, engines of destruction meant to erase entire worlds. They burned colonies to ash, thinking fear would finally bend humanity, but it did not. When one world fell, another swore vengeance. When one fleet was destroyed, new ships were forged from the wreckage. Even civilians turned their pain into resistance. Farmers became fighters, miners became saboteurs. Every life lost only deepened humanity's resolve. Then came the final battle. The Empire gathered its largest surviving fleet around its throne world, a planet covered in towers of steel and fire. The skies above it burned with thousands of warships. This was the Empire's last wall, and they believed no enemy could ever breach it. But the humans came anyway. Their fleet was smaller, scarred from countless fights. Their ships bore the marks of sacrifice, patched armor, scorched hulls, names of the fallen carved into steel. Yet their spirits burned brighter than ever. As they approached, one message was broadcast to the entire galaxy in every tongue. We are humanity. We do not bow. We do not break. And we will never surrender. The battle exploded with fury. Enemy cannons lit the void. Human ships charged through fire, refusing to retreat. Fighters swarmed dreadnoughts, striking their weak points. Destroyers sacrificed themselves to open paths for carriers. Every moment was chaos, every second filled with loss, but the humans pressed on. At the center of the battle stood the Empire's final weapon, a fortress ship larger than any before, bristling with guns and shielded by layers of energy. It loomed like a mountain, a symbol of the Empire's unshakable rule. But symbols could fall. Human ships hurled themselves against the fortress ship. Wave after wave struck, tearing away its shields. One corvette, crippled and aflame, rammed into its hangar, exploding from within. Another carrier, with engines failing, dragged the fortress into the path of a minefield. Piece by piece, the Empire's pride was ripped apart by the very people they had mocked as weak. And then, at the final moment, a human battleship gave its last sacrifice. Its captain spoke only 4 words before the charge. For Earth, for all. The ship dove straight into the fortress ship's core. The explosion that followed split the sky. Fire spread through the Empire's greatest weapon, and in moments it was gone. The throne world shook. The Empire's fleet broke. What had once ruled the stars now collapsed in fear. The galaxy fell silent. Humanity had won, not because they had the strongest weapons nor the largest fleets, but because they never surrendered. They had proven the ancient warning true. They had shown every world, every ruler, every soldier that humans were not to be underestimated. On Earth, bells rang. Across colonies, people wept and cheered. In the galaxy's farthest corners, enslaved worlds whispered of freedom. Humanity had carved its name into the stars, not as conquerors, but as survivors who refused to kneel. And so the warning became a law spoken in every council, carved into every war table, passed through generations like sacred truth. They were warned, never attack humans, because humans never surrender.